Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about some classic books that I think are perfect for beginners. All of the books that I've chosen have three things in common. Number one, they're accessible, so they're easy to read and understand. Number two, the plots aren't too complicated, but still interesting. And number three, they're not very long. They're either at or under 400 pages, so it's not going to take too long to read. I've also picked books that fall under different genres. And I did this on purpose because I know that whoever's watching this video, you have a genre that you're drawn towards. And so I wanted to feature as many different genres as I could. I think there's something here for everybody. The first book that I want to talk about is one of the shorter ones on the list, and it's also very popular. And that's The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is the prequel to The Lord of the Rings. And I think a lot of people know what this story is about, but I'm just going to give you a really brief summary of the plot. This is the story of Bilbo Baggins. He is a hobbit who is leading a very comfortable life at the beginning of this book. And all of a sudden he's thrust into this epic adventure with a wizard named Gandalf and a company of dwarves. And this company of dwarves is led by a king who is determined to take back a treasure that was stolen from his kingdom, and that treasure is being guarded by a dragon named Smaug. I absolutely love this book. It just has everything. It has great characters, a very interesting plot. It's not too long. This is a perfect pick for anybody who wants to try fantasy for themselves, or anyone who's a fan of fantasy. I think both of those types of people would love this book. The next book I want to talk about, I don't have a physical copy of, but I'll insert the picture here, and that is The Princess Bride. And this is another very popular book, and I think the movie has a little bit more recognition than the book, but I thought the book was amazing. If you're anybody that enjoys action, adventure, and would like to laugh, this is a perfect choice for you. It's one of those books that people have probably watched the movie and forgot that it's based on a book, or just haven't read the book yet, but I really urge you to read it. There's a little bit more in the book that really stood out for me. This is definitely a classic that while you're reading it, you don't think you're reading a classic, and so I think it's the perfect book to start with. So if you're looking for a classic that doesn't really read like a classic, or just a book that's lighthearted and fun, then I highly recommend The Princess Bride. The next book I want to talk about is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I'm not going to go too much into the plot of this book because I have a feeling that once you hear the title, you already have an idea about the plot of this book. But I'm here to encourage anybody who is either on the fence about reading this book or is interested in vampires or horror. I think you should still give this book a try. When I read it, I was very surprised. I was not expecting to get the story that I did, and that's because we've heard so much about vampires and Dracula as a character that we think we know what it's all about, and then you read the book that started it all and you realize that your assumptions were completely off base. There is so much more to Dracula, the story, than meets the eye, and I think it's still a very enjoyable story. The characters are very interesting, and there's a creepiness throughout this book that I think really elevates it to more than just a horror story. So I definitely encourage you to pick it up. This one is also not too long. It's under 400 pages. I highly recommend this book to anybody who loves horror, suspense, and who's just curious about where the idea of vampires came from. I think you'll really enjoy it. The next book I want to talk about is one of my favorite classic books of all time, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And this book falls under the genre of mystery or suspense. There is a very creepy vibe to this entire book, and you don't really know how it's going to end, and you don't really know what's going to happen, but you want to keep reading no matter what. This is the story of a young woman who early on in the book marries a widower and moves into his mansion. Rebecca is this man's ex-wife, and she passed away a year ago under mysterious circumstances, and our main character is just trying to become accustomed to this new life that she has ahead of her, and she's finding that she can't because Rebecca keeps coming up in conversations, The housekeeper has this ridiculous obsession with her, and constantly compares her to the main character, and a lot of different events happen where Rebecca just keeps cropping up, and this builds into this huge climax of figuring out what really happened to Rebecca. I don't want to say too much about the plot because this is a mystery / suspense novel and I don't want to ruin it for you, but I can say that it's very interesting. Even though it's a slower type of read, there's so many different creepy things that happen that you can't help but want to read on and see what really happened to Rebecca and why she has such a hold on everybody around her. And I highly recommend this book if you're into slow thrillers or anything like that. I think you would really love this book. The next book I want to talk about is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is a story of 4 sisters who are very close, and we read about them growing up and coming into their own. Each sister has their own distinct personality, dreams, and just ways that they handle situations that happen to them. You kind of can't help but care about the March sisters. You want to see them succeed and excel and learn from their mistakes. So this is definitely a book that I would say would fall more under the young adult genre. The plot is not too complicated, neither is the writing, so I think you would really enjoy this if you're into, YA or just coming of age stories, or really want to read about relationships and close sister bonds and things like that. I think you would really enjoy it. The last book I want to talk about is a Jane Austen novel. And I was debating whether I should include a Jane Austen novel on this list, but I know that when people think of classics, they think of Jane Austen and they want to know which one to start with. And I happen to be of the opinion that the book that people should start with is Persuasion by Jane Austen, and I think I'm alone in that. I don't really hear a lot about people recommending Persuasion as the first one to read, but I recommend it because it's one of the shorter novels that Jane Austen has written, but also it's one of the better romances that I believe Jane Austen has written. I think the relationship between Anne and Wentworth is just so beautiful and, I don't know, passionate but reserved, and there's just something about these two characters that I love. I love Anne Elliot as a character. She's definitely the more grown-up heroine of Jane Austen novels. She's also more of a loner. I identify a lot more with her than with any of the other characters that Jane Austen has written as, the main characters in her novel. The second one being Eleanor, but Anne is just my girl. I love Anne, and I can completely understand what she's going through in the beginning of this novel. So I always think of Persuasion. I think it's probably my favorite Jane Austen novel. And I highly recommend this one for anybody who wants to get into Jane Austen but doesn't want to commit, too much time. If you're interested in Jane Austen or just a good romantic story, then I highly recommend you pick up Persuasion. I absolutely love it, and I think it's one of Jane Austen's best novels. So that would be my pick for the first Jane Austen to dive into. Those are my picks for classics for beginners. I really hope that this video was helpful to some of you or inspired you to pick up a book that you otherwise wouldn't have. I think all of these are great stories, and I highly recommend all of them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.